awesome. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who we haven't seen for a while, great to see you back. Laura, I'm talking to you. Oh, Christiane is here too. I see her on the second page. Oh, awesome. So yeah, if you haven't been here for a while, awesome. Thanks for coming back. For those of you who are coming weekly, always great to see your face. Thank you so much. So yeah, Adam just quickly asked me, because of course, for those who were here last week, I made the very teary announcement that I'm stepping back from my role as community manager. So I am with you through till the end of December, and then maybe just secretly and hiding in the background in the new year, just supporting Bridget quietly. But yeah, so you can harass me for a few more weeks. Yeah, sorry. And Brent, I'll leave. I'll try to send you all my good jokes, or I think you're the only person who's really thought I'm truly humorous, so I appreciate that. So what are we doing here at Rainforest? We're building a network. We are building a community of believers and dreamers and doers and innovators all around tech and innovation in the province of Alberta. So we have people from across the province with us today, from Calgary, from Edmonton. Anyone not in Calgary or Edmonton? I see Megan's putting her hand up. Awesome. So yeah, sometimes we get people from like the Lethbridge and Medicine Hat area or up north. Oh, Megan's here from Banff. There, she can give you the hot tips on what restaurants are open and not open. Megan, how did you find out? If you're in Banff, how did you find out about us?
I do a lot of my business in Calgary, but through peer guidance.
Okay.
And through the Junction program I'm currently in right now.
Oh, fantastic. Good to know. So yeah, just knowing that even though we've got kind of two large major centers, that there is reach into those other municipalities and regions in the province that we're supporting. So as a group, we're working to improve the culture around tech and innovation, create trust, paying it forward, giving free help, and really creating momentum in what we're doing. And we've got 6 pillars that we're founded on. And for the month of November, we've been focused on leadership. So we've had some leadership speakers join us throughout the month, and we have 3 more today. I see Steve, who talked with us earlier in the month, has joined us again today. And so we're going to have a really cool conversation with these 3 leadership experts and hopefully inspire you. So we're going to let them introduce themselves. And yeah, no problem. Of course, Shannon, of course, the doorbell rings always during a meeting. So we're going to let them introduce themselves. And then I've got some questions for them. And then then we'll kind of open it up to the room to have some questions. So that is what we're going to do today. So with Shannon stepping out, Stephanie, why don't you start and give us the lowdown?
All right. Thanks for inviting me to this, Courtney, and it's lovely to meet all of you. I am Stephanie Pollock. I live here in Calgary, Alberta, and I don't have any slides for you today because I spend my slide time dealing with 2 kids who are hub schooling at home. And so I spend way too much time in slides, so I'm just coming and speaking for you and taking a break from the slide deck. So a little bit about me. My background is in communications. I graduated from the U of C in communications, and then I moved into the nonprofit sector. I worked for the YMCA and for the Red Cross in communications. And then I jumped over into the corporate sector and worked for Enbridge in the community investment department of the public affairs group. So I did that for a number of years, which was really rewarding to be able to give money back into the community and get to know all of the amazing community agencies in Calgary and Edmonton and beyond that are doing really exciting work. Then in 2008, I decided to take a big leap of faith, no runway, no nothing, and start my own business. And I started a communications consulting business initially while I was going and getting some coach training. I got pregnant in that same period of time, got married, and so I birthed a baby and a business all in the same year in 2008, 9-ish, little bit of overlap in between. So I've been running my own coaching business since 2008 now. And so I'm 12 years in, and I call myself unemployable at this stage. I'm not sure a company would take me back. Maybe they would. And what I do now primarily is work with entrepreneurs and executives to help them step into their leadership, become stronger leaders, stronger communicators, and really stay aligned with what's important to them and their values and do work that really matters to them. So how I do that is through one-to-one coaching. I also run some mastermind groups, virtual mastermind groups, and I work with clients actually all over the world, which is really exciting to see the nuances and differences between countries. I am the host of On Hiatus, thanks to COVID, podcast called Rise Without Compromise. So I've been doing that for a long time, almost 100 episodes in. And I am a recent founder of a leadership community called LWOL, which is around helping women become better, braver leaders. So that's a little bit about me. I am a hardcore coffee lover. You will always find a coffee in my hand at any given time. I was born and raised here in Calgary, and I have a brand new puppy named Bear who has been with us for 3 days and is distracting me to no end, and is on a walk right now with my family to give me a little bit of breathing space because he is always nipping at my feet. And if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on Twitter. That's where I hang out the most. That's where Courtney and I chat often, and I can be found at Steph_Pollock. So that's a little bit about me.
Perfect, thank you. Shannon, you can go next.
Hi, sorry about that. Of course, when you go into these meetings, your doorbell rings or something crazy, right? And that just happened. So anyway, thank you. And I'm sorry, Steph, I missed a little bit of yours, but I do follow you on Twitter and love all the great work that you're doing. So my name is Shannon Pestun, and I often refer to myself as an accidental banker turned accidental entrepreneur. So I have spent most of my career, my 20-year career was spent in marketing and communications. And I ended up in banking, working at ATB Financial, where I was a senior marketing manager for the business line, which means that we were looking at how to be more supportive to entrepreneurs across the province. It was in that work, though, that I noticed an entrepreneurial gender gap, and I have been tackling that for the last 5 years or so. So when I say I'm an accidental entrepreneur, I decided right in the middle of the pandemic, because we're still right in the middle of it, that I was going to start my own company. And so I have a consulting company that's focused on advancing women's entrepreneurship in Canada, as well as we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of my contracts is with the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, which is part of the federal government's women's entrepreneurship strategy. So I lead all the work that is focused on banking and finance and helping to break down some of the critical gaps that women entrepreneurs face in their journey. So you can find me, I'm always active on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Those are my primary handles. So you can find me at Shannon Pestun, and I'm always happy to have new conversations and new connections. So welcome the opportunity to meet with all of you. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation. So thank you for the invitation.
Awesome, thank you, Shannon. Kevin, you are next.
Awesome, thanks. I feel like I shouldn't do my PowerPoint now because nobody else did, but I think I got pretty pictures, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. So hi, everybody. Kevin Gangel. I'm one of the co-founders of Unstoppable Conversations. The personal origin story, as I like to tell it, is a small town Kansas boy moves to Japan right after university, meets a Chinese Canadian girl in a pub. We're both looking for a rebound relationship, and that did not work out. So 25 years later, here I am still in Canada. And I have two boys, 17, 14. My wife is a mystery novelist. And the American origin story is relevant to today. I did vote in the last US election and my side won. So to all my fellow Canadians, you're welcome. And today, later this afternoon, actually, I get to go to my swearing in ceremony to become a Canadian citizen, a long time coming. So I'm super excited. And my 17-year-old and I will probably get to vote in Canada for the first time in whatever election is next. So super excited about that. In regards to Unstoppable Conversations, so this line at the bottom, see what others don't, say what others won't, do what others can't, is a promise we make to all of our clients that they'll discover something in their blind spot that they had no idea was there that will make a massive difference for them. Who we are and what we do, 10-person boutique consulting firm based mostly in Western Canada, but we do work all around the world. The reason we exist, as we would say it, is to cause leadership for a transformed world. And by a transformed world, we mean a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out. And if anybody's paying attention to the news these days, that is not what's currently going on in the world. And we're a very strange kind of management consultant. We don't care about systems or process or even information for that matter. We only care about paradigm and context. So we work usually with groups of leaders internally or complex multi-stakeholder relationships to have them discover the group think, the paradigm they're stuck inside of that they have no idea is there, that's actually has them locked into some version of, repeating the past, hopefully, 3% improvement or continuous improvement. So we don't do that. We're in the intentional disruption business. couple of kind of clients that we like to work for. We usually get hired for leadership, culture, or change. So it could be from a big corporate like Lululemon to a national not-for-profit like the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, to the country of Slovakia, or the Dene Nation, which is mostly in northern Alberta and the Northwest Territories. So with the Dene Nation, I'll talk about their national chief probably a little bit later. But they now speak with one voice for the first time since 1969, based on this kind of context busting work. That's not something they could say previously ever since the Indian Act. And they got $8 million in funding from the government of Canada to do a go to the land strategy in response to COVID that was based on Indigenous wisdom and knowledge. Very, very cool what they've done. CNIB used us to disrupt a 98-year-old business model that had been very successful from 1918 to about 2016. And there they realized it wasn't going to work anymore. So they blew it up and did something very different, which included dropping $4 million straight to the bottom line in an $80 million organization that they turned into a social enterprise model. And the country of Slovakia used us kind of strangely enough, I call it fighting Nazis. So they have about 14 actual Nazi party members elected to parliament. And they had 30 very high-powered leaders who would get together, and they collaborated, twice over 2 years, and they went away and did 30 different things. And it turned out that they had this thought in the background called "You're Not Gonna Get Me," that was literally a holdover from the Iron Curtain days. And that kept them from actually having each other's back. So we like to tilt windmills. We like to do big, crazy stuff and go after stuff that seems impossible. So that's us.
Awesome. So I'm just going to pass it over to Bridget because she was going to introduce you and give bios and do some bragging for you. So my guess is that she probably still has some bragging to do for you. So I'm going to let her reintroduce you and summarize, and then we're going to get into our Q&A.
Oh boy, now you got me on the spot because I think they did cover it all. But thank you, Courtney, for putting me on the spot like that. I do want to mention a few. I think, Stephanie, I think you filled it all out. I'm trying to throw some of your links in the chat as we go too, so people can find a way to connect with yourselves and your services. I think you covered most of it. Happy to hear about the podcast and things happening there. I know, Shannon, you definitely have some more bragging rights. You're too modest. Identified as a She Innovator, which I believe last night the last of the She Innovator event. Do you know, or of their work? Sorry,
I believe it was the last.
It was the last of the event.
Maybe the last for now.
For now, okay. And I do also want to just a little note on WEC in true rainforest spirit is that they have a portal where you can, for women, where you can gives or asks within the entrepreneurship community, which is a great way for people here to give back or to put out an ask if they have one. Many other things. I wish I was a little more prepared, but I am not. And a big congrats to you, Kevin, for your citizenship today. There's definitely some more bragging rights. I don't have them all prepared, but let's hear more about your work. I think that might help round it all up.
For sure, yeah. So I have some cues for the group, and so we're gonna ask them, and then I'll just I'll call on you to answer them. So the first question is, who is a leader that you admire, and which quality of theirs do you aspire to? So we'll go in backwards order of how we've been going. So we'll go Kevin, Shannon, Stephanie. So who's a leader you admire and a quality they have?
Awesome. So I got two answers to that. One's really simple because I think we all need really different perspectives all the time. And so I shared my wife as a woman of color. She grew up as a Chinese Canadian woman. I'm a white guy, and all that entails. And our kids, we call them halfies, right? And we have this conceit that, halfies are the most attractive people or whatever. So we had high hopes for our children. And we were talking to them years ago about how diverse our school was in West Edmonton. And I asked my then 8-year-old son, I'm like, how many halfies are there? He's like, what's a halfie? And I told him what I thought that was. And I'm like, well, how do you self-identify? And he thought about it. He goes, human? And I was like, man, that is like a way better answer. I was just like humbled and kind of ashamed, the hubris that I had in my view, plus just like the blindness. So I thought that was really amazing. And so Norman Yakalaya, who's the Grand Chief or the National Chief of the Dene Nation. So he's somebody I really admire. I hesitate to throw these names around, but he's the only person I know personally that has a shot at being a modern day, Martin Luther King or a Gandhi. So he took a leadership course with us that have him, discover the roots of the story that he created about himself. And I got his permission to share some of it, but he's a residential school survivor. And he decided at one point that the tattoo, the number that they put on him, which is horrific, but at some point in time, he realized he decided that that's who he was. And it was his story that I am that number that he was carrying forward with him in life that was holding him back. And holding back, he's previously at MLA and the NWT. He was a successful business person. He'd been a local chief of the Satu Dene. It's not like he wasn't successful. He was kicking ass in so many different ways. And, but he had the humility to like dig really, really deep, to go to the core of what his personal blind spots were, and then share that very publicly and openly with a group of people that, occurred to him as frightening, successful, white people. And then he was able to say to all of us that he had a new reason for being in life, because we talk about purpose a lot with our clients. And he said the reason he now exists is so that all Indigenous youth in Canada are free from the trauma of the past. Now, hearing him say that and then grapple with like, oh my God, what did I just say? How did I do that? I have no idea how to do that. So he went out and he talked to some of his elders, went out in the bush, which they told him to do, and he thought about it. And he came back and he said, the only thing there is for me to do is to run for national chief. So he's at the point now where he's putting together new youth councils, new elders councils, women's councils, men's councils to advise the Dene Nation. They're creating a new constitution that's never existed for them. They're going directly after systemic racism in policing across Canada, piloted in the NWT and then at a national level to try to put a permanent dent in that. And he is so humble and, frankly, scared to go after something that big, and he's doing it anyway. So courage to me is taking action in the face of fear, and he's got that in spades.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that story, Kevin. Shannon.
Hi. Well, there's so many great leaders out there, and I just thought I'd go back to a lady that I worked for years ago who really taught me so much about the importance of passion and resilience. And these are two of the traits that I took from her. The leader that I'm speaking of, her name is Joy Thomas, and she just actually retired from being the CEO of CPA Canada, which is Canada's accounting designation. I think passion, I pulled this one out because, passion comes in a couple of different ways. You can be somebody who's very boisterous and very passionate, and you can also be very passionate in a very quiet, more reserved sense. And that was certainly how Joy Thomas was. She wasn't loud, but her passion for the accounting profession, the reason for the designation and how it was going to advance not just the profession, but professionals around the world was something to behold. When I worked for her, I was in my late 20s, and she actually gave me my first true leadership role. And in fact, when I was hiring for the position, I remember the role was manager of marketing and communications. And when the contract came to me, it said director. And I actually called her and I was like, I think there's a mistake on the contract. And because I was obviously going to apply for a different role, and she felt at that point in time that the role deserved to be at a director level, and just was taking a chance on me, and I will always be grateful to her for that. And so what I remember about her was just this notion of passion and being so customer centric, and everything that we did was about our customers and who we were serving. And I think that was something that was a rally cry for all of us that worked for her, because she was so clear in what she was passionate about and why we existed as an organization. We knew, each of us as leaders, what our roles were and how we were to bring out our passion and our values to the people that worked on our teams. Earlier this year, I mentioned that she had retired, but when they asked her, how do you hope that you're going to be remembered? Like, what is your legacy for the designation? And at first, I do want to say that she became the first female to lead a professional designation organization in North America. And when she was asked how she wants to be remembered, what she said is, I'd like to be remembered first and foremost as a CPA who cares deeply about our profession, its relevance, and its future. And so I think her passion is just something that always stayed with me, and it taught me to find what I'm passionate about, because I so admired that in her. The other quality that stands out was her strength and resilience. And I think it was Gary, it was you mentioned earlier about failure, and I kind of popped onto the call when you were talking about that. But Joy really taught us all to take risks and embrace failures. And there were many times working for Joy that I feel that she believed in me before I was strong enough to believe in myself. And because of that, I learned how to be strong enough to believe in myself, even when people around me didn't believe in me. And when I worked for Joy, I led the marketing department, and to people like Stephanie, who are good at communications and marketing, and you focus on that, you're always thinking about the customer experience. And not when you're thinking about the customer experience, for me, the challenge was I didn't know what it was to be it was then a CMA, the designation merged, but I had no idea what this experience was to go through this rigorous training. And so it made it really difficult for me to relate to our members and to our industry. And I remember approaching Joy to see what she thought if I should, enroll in this CMA program. And when I look back on that time, I'm pretty sure Joy knew hands down that I was going to fail miserably, but she nonetheless encouraged me to write the exam. And as it turns out, I failed miserably. But when you're part of a culture that embraces failure, a team never holds that failure against you. And yes, personally, I was disheartened and I was embarrassed that I realized that, and when I realized I wasn't going to pass, and also that I wasn't going to try this again, the gift was that I was given the opportunity to try. And that also let me fail in a very, very safe place. And had that not happened, I would never have become a business banker. And I never would have given myself the chance to try something new. And had I not become a business banker, I wouldn't have started to understand the entrepreneurial gender landscape and do the work that I'm doing today. Interesting enough that years later, when I did become a business banker and I passed all my banking tests, Joy was actually the first person that I sent an email to. And when I told her I'd finally mastered the art of reading financial statements, she just laughed and said, you finally did it. So these are two skills and traits that I have learned from Joy and that I've carried through my career. And I hope that I have imparted those same traits onto people that have worked with me as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Shannon. Stephanie.
Well, it was tricky to identify just one person that I admire, so I'm not going to. I was thinking about the types of people that I admire, and the names that immediately come to me are like the Eleanor Roosevelts, Michelle Obamas, the Brene Browns, and in particular right now, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, is a particular source of inspiration for me in terms of the way that she leads with both kindness and firmness, holding two things to be true at the same time, and that is absolutely a fundamental belief of mine around great leadership, is that we can be more than one thing at the same time, and that's what leaders need to show up and be. But when I really thought about who are the leaders that I admire, it's not one person, it's not one person on a stage or a podium. I believe that leadership is a practice, not a position. It's not just about the title we hold or the status we have. It's about how we show up every single day to our work and to our communities. And so with that lens of everyday leadership, I just think of the clients that I work with who have had to pivot, adjust, get creative, try new things this year. I think about the businesses I know who have had the courage to say, we're going to close, or we're going to change, or we're going to deliver or offer our services in a different way to keep people safe. I think about the people who have given back or found creative ways to support those in need. Of course, I'm talking about in this pandemic right now. And I think about, all of our frontline workers, our teachers, our administrators, our healthcare workers. Those are everyday leaders, and we don't hear their names in the news, and they are not in the spotlight, but they are the everyday leaders who are doing the tough work, who are stepping in and showing up as best they can to keep people safe, to keep people healthy, to keep people inspired, to keep people fed, to keep people learning, whatever it is. And I think that it's really easy to look out there for what great leadership is, again, based on how many best-selling books they have, or how many letters they have after their name, or how many times they're on the news. And yet I believe it's really important to think of all of us as leaders, that we all have our own way, regardless of the position that we hold in the world, to be everyday leaders and to make a difference and contribute. And so when I was really thinking about this question, I was thinking like, yeah, I can highlight all these wonderful people and what they do, and the characteristics of kindness and vulnerability and firmness and decisiveness and clear communication and all of those things that I think are vital to great leadership. but I really want to throw a little spotlight on the people who are doing the work behind the scenes every single day, making things better and helping their communities and doing work that matters, that's aligned with who they are, taking risks, starting businesses, leaving businesses, all sorts of creative things that are happening. So that's who inspires me and gets me out of bed every morning to do the work that I do. It's all of you and everybody else who does work like you.
Awesome. I love that through kind of the thread of the three of you, there was that real human-centered approach that you all took, right? So, you know, and really looking at the people, you know, those leaders looking at the people around them and equipping them with the tools, right? And the inspiration that they need to step into their best selves as well. So really, really great kind of common thread, even though everyone working in different areas, that sense of paying it forward. All right, so Shannon, you're going to start the next one. We'll go Shannon, Stephanie, Kevin. The question is, when have you failed in offering someone leadership advice?
I feel like I fail every time I ask my partner to do something around the house. But I think it's because, and if I think about failing in offering someone advice, and Stephanie just sort of touched on this earlier, but leadership is not a position. And sometimes I think that what I have tried to do is to elevate people to the next level of their careers, failing to recognize that there is such thing as a grassroots movement that is sometimes more powerful than what can ever come from at the top. And a lot of that comes from actual passion. And so if I have failed, and I know that I have failed, I'm sure, I'm human, I'm going to make mistakes, but it's probably not taking the time to recognize that one person alone can change the conscience of an organization or can make meaningful change, whether it's through products or services or systems or processes. Kevin, I know that you don't go, you know, that's not your thing, but in a lot of organizations, they still function very much in those ways. And
You don't think they're bad, we just suck at it, so yeah.
Well, and in many cases we do. And I think there's a lot of people right now, I think we're moving to a very purpose-driven economy. And when we're moving to this state of purpose-driven economy, we're asking ourselves, what's more than profit? And I think we're all starting to take a step back. You're seeing it particularly, I think, when I think about the millennials who by 2025 are going to be at 75% of our working population. They are demanding a different work environment. They are demanding purpose. They are demanding transparency. They have a whole list of other characteristics that probably don't fit the leadership that I was born into and the era that I was born into in the corporation. So I will say that I think that if I have failed, it's to say that, to maybe to not have encouraged people to try their own. They don't need to be in a position of power or of influence to actually make a difference. And I will probably just leave it there. But I'm sure if people who've worked for me in the past can probably tell you more where I have failed than I can.
I just add, Courtney, this is really interesting. Patrick, I don't know if you're finding the same as you chew your lunch. Patrick and I were on this Zoom link here before the meeting started to chat about students' involvement in the rainforest. And then we kind of veered off another direction and talking about how the importance of teams in startups and in the innovation community, and how we often give so much kudos and respect to founders, but the teams that we need to foster within the city to grow the ecosystem are so key, and something we really all should be focusing and will be focusing on more in the rainforest. So I think it's a good segue from what both Stephanie and Shannon have shared so far. It's something for us to all keep in our minds.
All right, I think it was my turn. All right, failed leadership advice. So I was thinking about this. I don't, I'm going to break the rules again. I don't have one. Courtney's like, thanks. I don't have one particular story because, like Shannon said, there's many, right? Part of leadership is you're going to mess up a lot. But I thought what might be more helpful, rather than highlight one particular incident where I failed at dispensing leadership advice, is to talk more about how and when I failed at it. Because then you can use that to think about that in terms of your own leadership. And I also, wearing the lens as I talk about this, working with clients who are leaders and who are trying to become better leaders. So both for myself and how I'm helping guide them in becoming better leaders. So I think often it's less about what we say, but how and when we say it. And so for me, the three things that I find are most common when leadership advice falls flat or fails, or yeah, just doesn't resonate, or the people don't act on it, or when these three things are missing. So context, clarity, and consent. So I'll go through those really quickly. So the context is, have you ever been in a meeting with your boss or somebody, or in any situation, and they come in and they've got all these things you should be doing, and you're like, what are you even talking about? I don't even know where this is coming from. It feels out of left field. I don't have any context for this. I'm missing part of it. That to me is where dispensing leadership advice can really fall flat, is if you haven't given any context or information, or helped bring people into, why does this matter? What is the meaning behind this? What are we trying to do here? When we don't do that, I find it usually, it goes here and goes out here. So that's the context. The second one, which I've already touched on and I'll touch on again because it's so key, is clarity. So if we come to leadership discussions, or we're guiding a team, or we're having a one-on-one meeting with somebody, and we're trying to get them to see a different way of doing something, or we want them to do something different, if we come at it indirectly, passive aggressively, defensively, if we're hedging, if we don't provide actual information to help them take action, and so we're lacking in that clarity of focus around what we want them to do, and why it matters, which is the context. They just don't have enough to do that, or they get defensive in return, and then you have a really tough conversation, or people just dodge each other. I see that all the time with my clients. They're trying to have these tough conversations. They don't want to have them, so they sidestep them, or they talk around them. I'm sure we've all seen that. So I think clarity is a really important piece when you come into a leadership conversation where you're dispensing advice. And then the third one is consent, which is actually less about giving advice and more about guidance and helping people come to their own answers. Now, granted, I wear a lens of coaching, which means I'm not here to give you advice. I'm here to help you pull out the best of what you've got, and I will guide you and prompt you. But I don't believe I'm the all-knowing being. So that's how I come into it. So that's my filter. But again, if people aren't bought into what you're talking about, if they're not bought into the story or the connection of what we're trying to do, and if it doesn't align with their values, then it just, they might hear it, they might do it because there's fear there around repercussions if they don't. But that true leadership where they are empowered then to take the lead isn't going to be there. So that's context, clarity, and consent, I think, are really important if you want to have a productive leadership conversation.
Awesome. Kevin.
So really great, Stephanie. I love that. So mine's kind of similar, but I don't have the perfect story either. But I wanted to just kind of, maybe define, leadership in regard to leadership advice. So when I consistently fail is when I, give somebody the answer, and when I do give them the answer, it's usually some version of do it my way. So the my way is probably pretty obvious when I say it that way, that doesn't work. But it's actually the doing, right, that doesn't work in leadership advice, I think. So for me, leadership is much more about being. Doing has to do with management, which I would distinguish from leadership. Management for us is have the right stuff in the right place at the right time so people can produce results, mostly like yesterday, a little bit better. So it's about protecting past-based success. Leadership for us is the intentional disruption of the status quo for a big unlikely future that wasn't going to happen. So leadership for us, again, is about the being of leadership. And just recently, this happens corporately and in my personal life, but especially in a post-COVID world and everything so virtual, there's lots of cultures. We're talking to people in Slovakia. I've got a new vendor who's, in the Czech Republic. I'm working with, northern communities in the Northwest Territories, a lot of indigenous communities. I think I've got something to offer, and I probably do, but when I don't get into their world first and find out what's really, really going on for them, I start giving advice way too fast. Just recently in my personal life, there's a young person that I'm supporting, and they're 17, they're out on their own. They got themselves out of a bad domestic situation, showing a lot of independence, and they check almost every diversity box, there is. So living in a white colonial, patriarchy based on capitalism, they've got the deck kind of stacked against them. And I was like, what do you need? What do you really need? And they're like, I need a job. I'm like, I get it. You're on your own apartment. You're going to be out of transitional housing in a while. Like, let's do the job thing. And I really wanted to let them lead me in leading them. So I got an action in the job. And then I was like, annoyed and disappointed and frustrated because they weren't getting back to me and they weren't leveraging all of these, contacts I have. I'm trying to use my privilege for good and be a good ally and all these things. And it turns out, what's happening right now is they're literally having a breakdown. They just called me this morning after 5 days of silence. I'm complaining to my wife about how, it's like, they're not taking advantage. And like literally having a breakdown right now, like having a medical emergency. And I was one of the first person they called. And like they are doing everything they possibly can. But I so quickly, get into, I think I've got the answer. I think I've got something figured out. I've got, a solution for people. And if I don't stop and go, okay, why do you need that? 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 And just drill down as far as I possibly can so that they can fully own whatever it is I can offer. And it's their solution, not my solution.
Can I just jump in on that too? I think that's so important because I think great leaders are also really great problem solvers. And it's knowing when you're not actually solving the problem, but you're trying to raise someone to be able to solve the problem for you. And that can be a really tricky place for leaders. I think particularly young entrepreneurs see this quite often when they're just starting out because so many people are passionate about their ideas. They're trying to get them off the ground. And sometimes you think you're the only one that's deeply connected to what you're doing. And so when someone is trying to bring new ideas to you or look at new ways of doing things, sometimes we have to be able to step back as leaders and who are very good problem solvers for the most part, I would say, but knowing when to put, your brakes on to let someone else figure out the problems. For sure. Great comment, Kevin.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. So order for the next question. We'll go Stephanie, Kevin, Shannon. It's like algorithm, right? So from all of the leaders you worked with, what are the top 2 qualities and traits you most consistently see?
I was going to use what I was talking about before with clear communication. So that's a bonus one. I think that's always true. But I want to add another one to the mix, which is a consistent pattern I see, which is great leaders lead from their values first. They know what is important to them. They have a clear sense of what they value. They help, if they operate a team, they help their team rally around a core set of values that are important to them. So everything starts and ends there. I do a lot of values work with my clients, and it is the very unsexy work that, we hear it. We've seen these long laundry lists where you go shopping for words that you say are important to you. Values work, in my opinion, takes a little bit more effort than that, and we get really down to the core of what's most important. And when you have that, it's not just a set of words, it's not a glass plaque that hangs in your lobby. It is an anchor, a lighthouse that helps you make strong decisions. It helps guide your thinking. It helps you decide what's important, what's not important, where to focus, where not to focus. It helps you deal with the really tricky parts of leadership, because leadership isn't always the spotlight piece. Sometimes it is dealing with, COVID is a great example of businesses shutting down or having to make a hard call or lay people off or whatever it is. There's some really hard parts of leadership. And my work, I find that with my clients, when they're anchored in a set of values that are important to them, it doesn't make that decision easier, but it does create some ease in the decision making. It gives them a container or some constraints for which to make those key decisions because they have something that's guiding them. The clients who aren't really clear on what they value or what their company values, they tend to just kind of try stuff. They're moving all over the place. They're very externally focused on what other people think they should do. Those that have that really strong set of values can kind of come inward and say, okay, what's important here, and can operate from there. So that's my first one. Courtney, do you want me to do both? Yeah, okay. And then my second one is curiosity. I think great leaders are curious people. They are curious about the world. They are curious about people. They are curious about themselves. So they're able to self-reflect. They're able to ask great questions and talk to people and dig. Kevin was talking about, that so what, keep going until you get to the root of something. That stems from a place of curiosity. And when we come to something from a place of curiosity, we are much more likely to not fall into kind of rigid box thinking, one-way thinking, all or none thinking. or what I see often with my clients, which is perfectionist kind of quality of thinking, which is like, I have to get it just right or else. And then the imposter syndrome kicks in and we start to worry we're going to be found out to be a fraud. When we can approach things from a place of curiosity, ask better questions and just kind of step back and say like, okay, well, what's that about? Or what might be driving that person to make that comment? Or what's another way we could look at the situation? When we ask questions like that, we can stay open to opportunities. We can stay open to different perspectives and worldviews that can help inform our decision making. And we can come at it from a place of, like, you know, Brene Brown talks about that wholehearted leadership, right? Where we all can be at the table and we can all have a role to play. Leaders who are not curious or who kind of stray from that curiosity, it's a fear-based response around, I have to be seen as knowing the answer. I'm a leader, I've got to get it right. I think great leaders are willing to say, as Shannon said, as Kevin said, as Sydney was talking about earlier around that fear of failure, great leaders say, yeah, I mess up. I don't know all the answers. I'm going to stay curious and go figure it out. And so I think that curiosity piece is a key cornerstone. And if you can come back to that, you can see a much bigger picture of what's available to you than if you're trying to, you know, be fixated on knowing the right answer. So curiosity and values driven are my two.
Good job lining that up, Courtney, because I can springboard right off of that for sure. So first off, we're a little Unstoppable's kind of leery of traits, right? And we're a bit of a contrarian when it comes to leadership. And we think one of the things that's missing in the current leadership paradigm is like, oh, if I just did things like Jack Welch, or if, I just did things like this other leader, if I just had what they had, then I could do what they do. And we think that is a red herring or a rat hole. So I'm going to answer it sort of in capacities. It might be a trait, but it's really two things. I'd say the capacity to let go of the past, which is directly related to the fear. That's one of the past that people drag with them into the future. So letting go of the past is the first capacity, and the second capacity is dealing with reality. So in regards to letting go of the past, with CNIB, one of the quote unquote smaller results they produced, they were locked in a 2-year union dispute over this $80,000 complaint, and they had brought in a negotiation mediator for 5 days at $8,000 a day. And using a divergent, conversational model that we teach, the HR manager basically texted the person and said, hey, like, I just figured out, like, this is really personal for you, and I've got it that, like, you're making it personal against me, and I've had it like you're the enemy, for the last 2 years. So, I want to ask you a question. Like, literally, they've been split up into separate rooms, weren't allowed to talk anymore. So she went in the hallway and she just said, like, really, like, well, why is it personal for you? But like actually meant it for the first time, not like, why is it personal for you, you so-and-so and so-and-so. And then she basically said, why? Tell me more about that. What else? What else? What else? For like 20 minutes, completely free of her judgments and preconceptions. And at the end of it, he finally wound down from screaming in her face to like, just, yeah, that's it. And she said, what do you want to do? He said, let's send the mediator home. I think we can settle it for $5,000. So the dispute went from $80,000 to $5,000. They cut the check, sent the mediator home, saved another $24,000 in fees from them. It's like $100,000 in 20 minutes. And then a month later, they started up, meetings again between the union and the organization. They figured they created another $1 million in ancillary value just from that. But she had to let go of her strongly held judgments, opinions, beliefs, justifications, all of those pieces. Now that's easier said than done. Now that's correlated to the ability to deal with reality. And if you're courageous as a leader and you're willing to get how much you suck at listening, and I'm indicting me, right? How much I suck at listening, I dare you to try to see if you can say back to what somebody says in an important situation, exactly what they said, how they said it. Or just go around and listen today. You'll listen to other human beings ask somebody a question and see how many times the other person answers the actual question instead of some other question. I guarantee most people like having a conversation in their head about the question, and then they speak from their opinions about what's going on in their head, not the actual question. It's the root cause of all confusion and conflict between human beings, because we're not dealing with what people actually said, we're dealing with the story in our head about it.
Awesome. So I just want to be really mindful of time because we have about 10 minutes left as a group together. So before we exit, I want to say first, thank you so much for the three of you for joining us today. I have been writing my own little notes over here. So what we're going to do is, yeah, Patrick, the worst problem is the disconnect between my head words and my mouth words. Yeah, totally, right? So what I want to do, so I was going to do rapid fire questions just to the three of you, but I'm actually going to put rapid fire questions out to the whole community. But rather than speaking them out, we're going to type them out in the chat so that we actually get a really great list of resources that we can share with each other. So rapid fire questions coming your way. Oh, did Shannon answer the last question? No.
I did not.
So
I was about
after
to.
Shannon answers the last question, thank you, Stephanie. I can't count apparently. After Shannon answers this question, then we're going to do rapid fire as an exit. So go, Shannon. Sorry about that.
No worries. I thought I was getting off easy on that one. I guess my response to this is more philosophical in nature. And I say that because I really feel like we're at a critical point of another type of leadership that will be coming. And again, it's driven from this purpose, values driven economy that I believe is where we're headed as a society. And I think today, good business people, good business leaders also to some degree are good sociologists as well. I think we have to be able to anticipate where society's needs are going and how we're moving as a group of people, as humanity. And when I put that lens on it, where I land on sort of the traits that I'm thinking about, but are things around the good leaders will be very clear on what their values are and what their purpose is. They will also be very dependable because you'll need to stand true in the convictions and then in the things that good leaders will stand for. And it's also that whole notion of acting with integrity and being able to do that is really, how are you behaving when no one is looking? That is the true test of integrity. And I picked these because together what they form is the framework for trust. Every year, there's a group called Edelman. They do a trust barometer, the Edelman Trust Barometer. And this year was all centered on trust. And I just wanted to kind of share some of the learnings that came out of Edelman's Trust Barometer. But what they're seeing is that global trust, we're basically in a trust crisis is how they're actually defining this, where people around the world are really questioning whether or not our longstanding institutions can actually lead us into the future. And I certainly, when I think about, myself, I'm an Indigenous woman, I am an advocate for gender equality, I'm an advocate for closing gaps. I certainly feel this every day, and I think there's an awful lot of hurt in our world. And I want to share the following slide, and just give me 1 second to share my desktop with you. I want to share a couple of the slides that came out of the Ellen Trust Barometer. And the first one that I want to be able to show is where trust is declining across sectors. And I felt this one is really important because if we take a look at the sectors that are losing the most ground, we see consumer packaged goods, we see telecommunications, and we also see technology. And I think given the rainforest community, the ecosystem that's around us as innovators and entrepreneurs in tech, this is a big warning sign to all of us and an opportunity for us to lead differently. At the same time, one of the key learnings that came out is that employees, consumers, investors are all looking to have leaders that are speaking out on key issues. And a question that was asked about how should your CEO lead and should they take the lead on important issues? This is how the breakout comes down. And again, I take a look at training for jobs in the future, ethical use of tech, the impact that automation is going to have on jobs, inequality, diversity, climate change, immigration. These are big social issues that CEOs and that employees are expecting their CEOs are going to talk about. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think this again is a warning sign for our tech industry. I think it's an opportunity for us to think about how we're building trust in a very critical sector, because as we know, the rate of change will never be as slow as it is in this moment, and yet it will never be as fast as it is again tomorrow. So I think we have to really think about as leaders how we're going to be able to show up to create an environment where trust can thrive. So I will leave it there.
That's super fantastic. Okay, so we're going to go to rapid fire. Just a quick note, we only have 3 weeks in December. We are going to do, maybe we'll call them the ghosts of rainforest. We're going to do past, present, and future. So past is, we're going to reflect on what's happened in the past year, what you loved, what you liked about it. And so we can build off of those good things. The second one is going to be present. So it's going to be an asks and gives day. So what do you need right now? And then what can you give people? And the third day will be the future. So what do we want to see in 2021? What are your hopes and aspirations? And what can you contribute to? So Kevin, I see that you just put some information into the chat, which is really fantastic. Shannon and Stephanie, please make sure you drop your information in there as well. So there's some great opportunities in there. So the first rapid fire question is, so this is for everyone and they can put it in the chat. What is your must read or must listen to leadership book or podcast? So everyone can just type in the chat their must read or must listen to leadership book or podcast. So I'm going to say I listened, I'll post it on my Twitter. Is I listened to Brene Brown Conversation with Dolly Parton. And oh my God, I want to list, like, it's like something you should, like, everyone should listen to every day. That woman, Dolly Parton, is unreal. I'm like, holy Dinah. Anyways.
Courtney, go read her book, Sarah Smart's book, She Come By It Natural, about Dolly Parton. It is excellent.
Like,
I just read it.
And she's funny. I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, so I see everyone, putting their stuff in there
lately because she contributed to COVID vaccine down in the States.
Yeah, totally. She's a giver, that lady. And so in this podcast, she talks about her giving roots and how she became like that person, and just how she was raised. So it was really super fantastic. So pop up. So also posts going on. So just let us know how we're doing over here. Podcast. Yeah, totally selfish plug, Stephanie. Absolutely. So, and I already plugged the Leaders, Innovators, and Big Ideas podcast. Okay, so that was rapid fire question number 1. So rapid fire question number 2 is, what is your favorite leadership quote? So if you have a favorite leadership quote, feel free to throw it into the chat. I feel like my new favorite one is, I'm just going to summarize Kevin from today. Leadership is the disruption of the future. I was like, yes. I'll tag you in it. So I was like, yeah, I love that idea.
Any Buckminster Fuller fans out there? I just put a Bucky quote in the chat.
Oh, fantastic.
I like his work with, I assume the Buckminster Fullerian stuff that he has done, or the Buckyball. We're all big fan of soccer balls, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Oh, Bruce Lee, good one out.
You like water, yeah, totally. Awesome. So yeah, just keep those coming. Steve, I was talking. Yeah, if you don't know what to do, make it up. No one knows the difference. Totally true. I always I realized this halfway through wedding planning. I was like, the only person who knows what this is supposed to look like is me. It's only me in my head. So I was like, great. So I literally I was like, I don't need this. No one knows it's supposed to be here. So
I think they say the same thing about theater too, is that no one really knows what the script is supposed to be as long as you make it work.
Yeah, totally. Right. So awesome. A huge thank you to Shannon and Stephanie and Kevin for joining us today. And then a huge thank you to everybody who came out to listen this whole month to everything around leadership, and who heard our scorecard report to the community last week. It's always so inspiring to see people here opening their minds and learning and being part of this really fantastic community. Yeah, I'll probably be emotional for all the rest of the weeks. Don't laugh at me. You don't make it harder than it needs to be. So
we love you.
everyone.
Just take it.
Yeah.
Just take it.
So the plan is I'm just going to leave the room open because it is close to 1 o'clock. So I'll leave the room open. So if anyone wants to just quickly connect with Kevin or Shannon or Stephanie or anyone else here in the room, we'll just leave the room open. I know it's a little hard because you kind of have to like negotiate around everybody. But the DMs also, or you should be able to chat with each other in the chat if you need to. So huge thanks to everyone coming today. Also, go buy Al's mom's art because I just got some and it's gorgeous. The pictures don't do it justice, Al. I'll say that. So go make a donation, go buy Al's mom's art, and have a